There is a reason why most companies change their career site about once every third blue moon. And that's because it's hard. I have been involved in a dozen at least career site reinventions, redesign, rewrites, refactors, replatforming, the works. In the end, this idea of we need a better career site. Right? I've solved and helped solve that problem a lot of different times for a lot of different people. And it always is hard. Oh, it's so hard. And let me tell you why. Because the career site, the homepage of your career site, may be the second most political piece of territory in your entire company. The first being what's on the company homepage, meaning you got this team and that team, and they want to be represented equally. And so you have to balance those messages. You have to make sure you're serving all these customers. You have to make sure you're serving all of their customers. You have to make sure you're balancing what internal teams care about, what that leader wants, and what this leader cares about. And it is a political minefield. The second is your career site home, because it's the same fight. Everybody who hires wants a say on that page. And when everybody thinks they have a say, you've got to juggle all those conflicting demands. And what you end up with is a compromise of a compromise of a Xerox of a compromise, right? What you see is usually pretty bland, right? And not only is it relatively bland because everybody and their dog had to kind of have some feedback on that word and that line and that color and all that stuff. And then you ran it through HR, and then you ran it through brand and comms, and then you ran it through legal. And at the end of it, you got kind of a Hallmark card of a site. Don't worry, it's true for everybody. That's just the nature of the beast. And that's why you don't change it very often. I don't want you to radically reinvent the career site. Do not. That is a nightmare I am not asking you to enter into. Certainly not in this part of the project. Eventually, you're going to do some things here that's going to help change and shape the employer brand on this site. And down the road, you might think about how do I reinvent it to really reinforce it. But for today, for this particular class, we're going to make some minor changes, but minor changes that make an impact. So the first thing you do you remember the prep work section where I said you should ask your designer to make a visual of your tagline, of your brand promise, or whatever that thing is? Guess where you're putting it first? It's on the career site. You are going to find a way to either replace the what's called a hero image, usually the big graphic, the big image of people working, people talking, people shaking hands, people at a whiteboard, right? All those kinds of images, the big glossy, whether you paid for them or where you manufacture them, doesn't matter. The big glossy image that's supposed to represent working at your company, you either replace that or on top of that, you stick text on top of it of your tagline, of your idea, of your brand promise. That is step one. That is usually a minor change because you're not changing all the text. You're focusing on, hey, I just want to set a frame. Now, if you're worried that everybody's going to have a problem with it, don't ask them. There are people you have to ask. Your TA leader needs to know about this because that site is their site. It directly and materially impacts what they do every single day. Two, you got to make sure it's cool with HR. But you're making a minor change. This isn't a big deal. And in fact, if you do this right, it actually sets the stage for bigger changes down the road. And you have to double check with legal. Now, these HR and legal especially are really useful because once they see this tagline, and maybe they'll give you some feedback and maybe they'll soften it, but this isn't for everybody. This is just a single change in the headline. That's all. Small changes. They might have some adjustments. They might have some changes. They might give you some polish, and they might give you some good heads up of a, hey, this looks like that. Hey, this might be actually setting a promise that we can't keep, right? Things like that. Good to know. A second set of eyes, a third set of eyes to look at your work and make sure it makes sense. Do not open it up to everybody. Please do not. Otherwise, they will also polish that down to a meaningless nub of an idea, which won't help you. But because we're only talking about a headline, a thing that sets the frame, it's not as big an ask. Once you do that, go into all the things you're looking at. Now, usually what's political is that I want to make sure we tell a story of our data science team, and I want to make sure we tell a story of our sales team, and I want to make sure we tell a story about our development team, and I want to make sure we tell a story about our G&A teams, right? Very political. Everybody wants roughly equal representation. I am not in any way, shape, or form going to tell you to mess with that. Except You are, but not in a way that they care about. So you have in your mind the idea of what the brand stands for, what you want people to think about when it comes to your company. You've built a headline that sets that frame. All the job postings now starting to say stuff around it, right? Now go into those testimonials, those quotes, those ideas about why you should work at the data science team or the development team or whatever, and make tweaks to them that further support the brand idea. Remember, it's focusing. Just because data science isn't, is particularly mathematical and whatever, if your brand is about support and taking care of your people, let's have them talk about how they feel cared about so that they can do their best work. In fact, I would look at the message you're already trying to send, intentionally or not, and figuring out how do I enable that through my brand. So if your data scientists say, come join the data science team, you'll do work you've never done in your life, and we're going to change the world, blah, 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 blah. Amazing stuff, right? But your brand is all about support. You change it to, hey, our data science team gets the support it needs to do amazing work. You're now hitting both notes. You're establishing this brand and you're saying why it's powerful so that the data science team who think they're all about innovation or all about impact or whatever it is, they're not going to be like, what is that? You're still talking about them. And you can say with reasonable certainty that, hey, the reason why you get to make this impact is because you're in an organization that supports you and gives you what you need to make that innovation. So you're not making a crazy claim. It's a minor change, but this is one of those things where you're going to make a lot of tiny changes all around the site, all around your entire recruiting ecosystem. And after this 12-week process, remember, we're going to do that as a calendar. After this 12-week process, you'll kind of take a step back and realize how everything went from saying anything, like spaghetti thrown against the wall, right? Which is whatever it takes to get people in the door. Suddenly it's all coming into focus and it becomes crystal clear what you're all about. And it doesn't take a radical reinvention. It takes minor adjustments as many places as you can find it, right? Simple. Whenever you talk about your benefits or culture, because on your career site, you very often talk about your culture. You have a great culture. The problem, of course, is when you talk about how great your culture is, you don't say how it's great or in what specific way it is great or what supports that greatness. You just kind of say, we have a great culture. We're all a family here. And it's really boring. But you now have a brand focus. You can now say in what way that culture is different, relative and connected to your brand. If your brand is all about support, your culture is about support. Show the 5 things you do that your culture enables or your culture is all about to show specifically how you're supporting people. Maybe those are your benefits, right? They're connected. Maybe if you're all about performance, you can say we have a performance-driven culture, right? We're not about caring about you so much. We're caring about making sure you do the best work possible, that you push yourself, that you test yourself, that you push the boundaries as much as you can. That is our culture. That is very different from saying we're a family and we try real hard, or we're a family and we care about outcomes, or we do whatever it takes to win. Those things are vague. We're a culture that values performance, and thus we do these things much more powerful. Now again, not a radical change, small changes. There will be a time in which you start to collect video testimonials or even just text quotes, testimonials from staff. When you do that, and you ask a question, hey, can you tell me about how great it is to work here? Don't do it that way. We'll talk more about this in other classes, but you're actually going to ask them questions around the brand. The thing about brand is that if I asked your recruiter list every positive thing there is about working at that company, they could probably come up with like 100 different things, but 90 of them are going to be exactly what that could get at any other company, or are really weak, or are really just kind of spin that's not really believable or isn't true in all cases, right? There's only a handful of things that are meaningful. This focus is saying, hey, recruiter, of all the things we could talk about, this is what I want you to talk about. And you're applying that idea to the career site, and you're applying that idea to employee stories. Of the 100 things they could say is great about this company, you need them to focus on those handful of things that you want them to focus, which means you have to ask them better questions that get them to that space. It means that you have to edit that material to focus exclusively on that. If Volvo were to suddenly let their users, their buyers, make commercials, they're not going to say, hey, just tell us everything you love about this car. They're going to ask, hey, can you tell us a story about how you felt safe in a Volvo? They're going to ask the prompt that is going to focus towards the brand. Again, slowly bringing it in, slowly creating that focus. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. This is a thing that happens slowly over time. Finally, if you have different offices, talk about their local culture, but again, focus it to the brand. So you're localizing a core idea or small set of ideas to all the various aspects of the company. So the more granular you get to location, to team, to function, to person, the more real they feel, the more concrete they are, the more you can count on that. It's not a broad generality. It's not a vague generalization. It's specific to that person. And the more you do that, the more likely it is that the candidate goes, it's specific to that person who acts and sounds kind of like me. Suddenly, I really believe this thing. Now, if you've entered the stage of this class where you go, this sounds monotonous, this sounds repetitive, so what, did you just say the same 4 words over and over again? No. The act of localizing your brand makes it so that the idea is the same, but it's translated into different ideas, into different situations, into different languages in some case. You want to translate it so that your Swedish team can talk about your brand and it's specific to the Swedish team, but your Toledo team can talk about it differently, but they're still talking about the same thing, right? It's not repetition. It's simply reinforcement. Remember, you are one of the handful of people in the universe who is going to see all this stuff. To you, it might get repetitive. Well, first off, you already believe this, so anything like that is repetitive. But also, the candidate's not going to see all this. If you're lucky, they see 10% of it. You're thrilled when they do. So bear in mind that you're one of the handful of people who gets to see all this stuff. It will feel repetitious and monotonous to you. You're not the user. You're not, we're not trying to change your mind. We're trying to change other people's minds. And they need to hear it regardless of where they come from and what their path into this entire brand is. So, speaking of messy channels, next video, we're going to talk about social media. I'll see you there.